Cyberpunk 2077. We're all aware of it by now. There's few people out there who haven't heard of its almost immediate fall from grace, though less are perhaps aware of a more recent tale, a tale of redemption, maybe. Okay, I'll put my hands up right now and say it. I was one of the crowd this time around. I was sucked into all the enormous hype built up by CD Projekt Red's marketing team over the course of, how many is it now? Holy shit, 9 years? I couldn't help it. I just believed what they were selling, like so many of us did. And why wouldn't we? The Witcher 3 was a great game. The fact that that game is so massive and so intricate and still looks so good and runs so well is crazy. The dialogue is in depth, the lore goes deep, and the choices actually matter. The only thing I never quite got to grips with was the combat and the spell system, mostly because I'm an idiot, but hey. So when Cyberpunk 2077 was announced, my mind instantly made the admittedly irrational assumption that the game would essentially be The Witcher 3, but now a gritty sci-fi with those nice, smooth, familiar FPS mechanics that I've grown so accustomed to over the years through other games like your Call of Duties and your Halos, etc. And as we all know, I was wrong. I was wrong to assume that. Silly me, eh? I don't think I need to go into too many of the details regarding Cyberpunk's release and the endless myriad of issues that plagued it several months after launch. Countless videos have analysed every little problem, every little broken promise, to death at this point. We all know it was a glitchy mess. We all know it was practically unplayable on old-gen hardware. The physics were fucked, the driving sucked, the world was empty, lifeless, it was all just shit. Just utter shit. Shit. Anyway, I didn't buy the game. Like I'm sure many of you did, I saw the reviews and heard the responses, and I just figured, yeah, maybe I'll stay away from this one. One or two of my friends did actually buy the game, one on PC, the other on the Series X, a few months after the game had launched, and from how they told it, they said that overall, it was still a good time, despite the occasional bug. Nevertheless, I was having none of it. Nope, it looks like trash. Sorry, you can't win me over this time. And to be honest, my opinion probably would have very much remained that way, locked in a state of disappointment and dismissiveness until the day I died. Had the game not suddenly gone on sale around my birthday, prompting my brother to offer to buy it for me. I should make it clear that this was during the summer of 2022. The game was released in December 2020, so you might say some time had passed, and the hype had certainly died down by that point. That being said, I hadn't expected the game to have changed all that much since then. I knew the devs were still chipping away and improving it where they could, but I hadn't heard any especially positive news and just assumed that whatever they'd been doing in all that time just hadn't been enough. My main turn-off, to be honest, wasn't the glitches or the performance issues. I figured all that would be fixed in time, but it was what people had said about the world and about the choices. An empty, lifeless world where your decisions hardly factor into it is fundamentally a much harder problem to fix than a few technical bugs. Okay, maybe more than a few. I simply assumed that no matter what the devs did to tweak the game, there was no way that they could fix what sounded like a fundamentally underwhelming experience. But now I've played the game, and upon completing it, twice I might add, I think I've realised that those problems just were never quite that big to begin with. Hear me out for a second, I'm not disputing that the game had serious issues. Technical bugs making the game unplayable at launch for players is, of course, unacceptable. But like I said, I figured those would be patched out as the months went by. I didn't buy the game because I didn't think that the game beneath the bugs and the glitches was worth experiencing. I just didn't think it sounded very good. And I think I was wrong about that. How to phrase this? Put simply, I experienced too much good content when playing through the game to believe that it could have all been added post-launch. Too much of the content was woven into the main missions, the primary narrative of the game, for it to have been patched in. When playing the game, I started to realise, hey, there's actually a world worth exploring here. I'm actually interested in these characters. I want to know more about them. I was invested in the writing, and that just isn't something that they could have added post-launch. Looking back, it seems to me that critics were perhaps a little extra harsh, perhaps rightfully so, on the game beneath the bugs and glitches, because of all those bugs and glitches. If the bugs stop you from experiencing the game as intended, breaking quests, failing to track choices, messing with character animations, and constantly taking you out of the experience, how can you ever hope to immerse yourself in the world? Take its conversations and characters seriously? With those bugs now mostly removed, I can confidently say it is far, far easier to allow yourself to be immersed and experience the world CD Projekt Red created as intended. Again, this is something they have to have created during those 9 years of development, not afterwards. And because of that fact, I can't help but feel a little guilty that I, like so many others, judged the game perhaps a little too harshly and completely disregarded any possible merit it might have, even years after its release. Right, so there's all the context. That's why I think I was wrong, personally. So now, let me tell you about why I think the game actually deserves your attention. Is that okay with you? Yeah? Still on the same page? Cool. The choices and your supposed impact on the world might not be quite as in-depth as many of us were expecting, but whilst that had been a concern for me initially, by the time I'd got past the prologue, I was just in it for the ride, man. The story, the world, the characters, these are what I found to be the highlights of Cyberpunk 2077. It would have been nice if we could have had a little more say in how things turned out, but what's there stands up on its own, and there's still enough variation in the ways you can approach the game to give you a reason to replay it. And for me, the writing was good enough that I still felt like I had plenty of agency, even if some of it might have actually been a bit of smoke and mirrors here and there. When I think about my experience with Cyberpunk 2077, my immediate thoughts aren't actually about the flow of the combat or the RPG elements or anything like that. They're about moments. Sitting down in a diner with Goro as fugitives, discussing your next move. Standing across a counter from Misty, debating destiny and fate. Riding through the desert with Panam and sharing tales about family. Cyberpunk is full of hundreds of little moments like this, and that's where I feel the game really excels. For me, it was spending time with these characters that really drew me into the game's world. I was arguably more concerned about keeping my companions happy than I was about progressing through the overall narrative in a particular way. If a side quest popped up for an NPC I'd gotten to know, I'd almost always prioritise that over completing one of the main missions. From the marketing, I was a bit worried that some of the characters might just fall into that edgy genre stereotype, making cringeworthy quips all the time and having no real substance to them. Like, say, something from that awful Saints Row game. But thankfully, that was not the case. Almost every meaningful NPC you encounter is a fully fledged, three-dimensional character. They feel like actual people with realistic fears, prejudices, and aspirations. Except the penis guy. The penis guy is just the penis guy. You know they've done something right when you can actually remember the names of the characters you've been speaking with. I kind of touched on this in my Andor video already, which, if you haven't seen yet, you should go check out, maybe go give it a watch. But when you put the time in to write believable characters, you're going to make people care. And if people care, they're emotionally invested. And if they're emotionally invested, then you've successfully immersed them within your world. Who'd have thought it, eh? Okay, yes, most more generic NPCs milling about the world and dishing out their smaller side quests are just glorified extras, but I'd much rather have a handful of fully realised characters to talk and interact with than hundreds of half-baked ones that all end up feeling pretty similar. I touched a little earlier on choice and how your decisions actually impact the game. Like I said, it's not what I'd hoped for when Cyberpunk was still in development. It's not like you can totally alter the way Night City lives and breathes, but I'd argue you don't need to. Yes, there are multiple endings, don't worry, I won't go into spoilers, but to me it felt like the main impacts my decisions had were on the people around me, rather than the world at large. And in a way, isn't that more true to reality? The things we do and say can easily affect those we hold close, but it's much harder for them to have any noticeable impact on everything else, as sad as that might be. This ties in very closely with the overall theme the game centres around, but more on that later. When you have conversations with characters, the game presents you with reasonably frequent dialogue choices. Some can feel very small scale, whilst others are very clearly going to affect what direction the game takes you in. A lot of the characters are also the quest givers, if you like, so how you speak with them can be an important factor in dictating what missions you get later on. I was often surprised at how consistent the game was in tracking how the NPCs reacted and felt about your character. Even if it was just a subtle line of dialogue, they'd inject just enough into the writing to make you feel like, even though hours of playtime had passed, that character still remembered what you'd said about that one topic, or how you'd shot that one guy, or whatever. I didn't realise at first how much knocking enemies out rather than outright killing them could affect how certain characters see you at certain moments. There's no morality system as such, but it's little details like that that I really appreciate. Hell, I didn't even know at first that sometimes when you shoot someone, they can be incapacitated without dying, and then it's up to you whether or not you decide to finish them off. I think it's important to remember that a good story doesn't necessarily need to be interactive. Films and TV shows immerse us all the time, and in those instances, we're of course just spectators. I'm not trying to excuse the game for lacking features that it implied would be there in its marketing, but I am trying to say that, in the end, the story was good enough to stand on its own. Like I said, I've only played the game twice. Maybe if I kept playing it over and over and over, I'd start to see more of the strings being pulled behind the scenes and realise there's not quite as much variety as it may seem, but the point is that so far, during my first two playthroughs, it seems like there is choice. It's debatable that how much choice there actually is doesn't really matter so long as the writing in the game itself makes you feel like you're in control, and that your decisions matter, one way or another. I mentioned the theme earlier. It's established all the way back in the game's prologue. There are many elements to it, but what I felt it boiled down to was, how do you want to be remembered? It's a big question and quickly spirals into other questions such as, what is life all about? What's the point? Do you do whatever it takes to make it to the top, potentially hurting those you care for? Do you go out in a blaze of glory, dying young but knowing, or hoping you had some impact on the world and that you'd be remembered as a legend? Or do you live quietly? Do you allow yourself to become a cog in a machine? Do you sell out, betray your beliefs for an easier life? What does it mean to be happy? What does it mean to be alone? These are big questions, they're complex questions, and they're all things I was provoked into pondering over as I explored the streets of Night City. And to me, that's quite special. If a game can make you think about your own life, the beliefs you have, the choices you've made, I'd say that's some pretty good writing. Again, I won't go into any major spoilers, but all of the endings I've experienced, or at least seen, so far seem to be pretty much centered around that core theme, and explore some of the answers to those questions in classic cyberpunk fashion. If you know anything about the genre, you'll know that a lot of it can be quite pessimistic, but there is still solace to be found if you know where to look. The first ending I got genuinely bummed me out, not because I was unsatisfied, but because I was like, oh shit, my choices led me here and I'm miserable. It's actually what prompted me to go through the game again and fix my mistakes, now that I better understood what it was going for, a liberty we unfortunately don't have in real life. God, I wish I did. Once I got my second ending, I managed to find a little more peace and I was happy with my choices, and I was able to leave my story at that. If I went for another ending now, it would just feel too artificial, and I'd just be doing it for the sake of it, going against choices I personally wanted to make. It's weird how the game sucks you in like that. I haven't played the game for a few weeks now, and I have to say, I kind of miss being in Night City. Look, I know the world isn't quite as deep as we all wanted. You can't walk into every building or change the environment or strike up random conversations with every person you meet. But once you accept that, you can't help but admit that, now it's being cleaned up, it makes for some damn impressive set dressing if nothing else. Again, I know a game has succeeded in immersing me when I actively avoid fast travel and opt instead to ride around, usually on my best friend's bike, to get between locations, looking to see if anything else pops up along the way, but otherwise just listening to the music, enjoying the ambience and taking in the views. There is an oppressive beauty to Night City, one that made me simultaneously melancholic and nostalgic. It's a little tough to describe, but perhaps it doesn't need describing, just experiencing. It helps that the world isn't too big. Again, I always think it's better not to be as wide as an ocean but as deep as a puddle with these types of things. The map's populated with plenty of places to go, sure, but I found myself hardly ever using it. There's just enough to do to keep you fully engaged, in my opinion, for a good 30 hours or so within your first playthrough. I didn't do many of the small gigs or the checklist or collectible type side quests, as admittedly they were a little bit repetitive, but the main missions and impressively all of the proper side quests were all very unique. I was honestly surprised that almost every side quest was different, either furthering your relationship with certain characters, giving you some new challenges to overcome, or just offering some levity and leaning into some of that fun, quirky video game goodness that you get with open world games sometimes. By avoiding repetition and constantly mixing up new and familiar faces, it never felt like you were just grinding for the XP, so to speak. There is even a feature, not unlike GTA, where you use your phone to speak with characters and talk about or accept certain quests whilst you're still on the move. This was a great way to make navigating quests feel a little more in-universe, furthering the immersion and allowing you to continue the game, rather than constantly pausing things and hopping into a menu. Which of course you can still do as well, obviously. I feel like I've hopefully got my point across now, but I can't wrap things up completely without at least discussing, the combat, that thing you'll be doing throughout the vast majority of the game. Well, I can happily say it's good. It's not groundbreaking or anything, it doesn't really reinvent the wheel, but it feels solid and it's fun. At least, that's what I think. In case you didn't know, this was all my opinion. Enemies aren't super smart, but if you keep the difficulty on normal, then you dispatch them pretty quickly anyway, and that way they don't ever feel like they're too bullet spongy, unless it's a boss where that sort of thing feels a little bit more acceptable. Progression is solid, and you never feel like a fight is totally impossible, but it takes quite a while to become so powerful that everything feels a bit easy. There's plenty of variety when it comes to how you approach conflict too. Stealthing is fine, though again pretty standard, but it is aided by the technical and hacking abilities you can acquire, which give you some extra options and spice up the gameplay, offering some slightly more unique methods of dealing with encounters than your typical run-of-the-mill shooter might. Ultimately though, I tended to either shoot or stab my way through most enemies. There's a lot of guns and melee weapons on offer here, and most of them feel chunky and satisfying to wield. The katana was an early favourite of mine, with some effective gore making for some rather gratifying kills. Promise I'm not a psychopath. There's enough depth to the melee combat to keep it interesting. You can block, dodge, parry, and perform little animated takedowns, and the guns spread across a variety of categories, including smart lock-on weapons and chargeable energy weapons, all customizable with mods and attachments, so it always feels somewhat fresh. There's plenty of options when you go into a fight. You can even upgrade your character with cybernetic implants, allowing you to do things like double jump and, well, straight up punch people's faces off. What's not to love about that, right? Now, I'm not saying the game is worth $60 or whatever. Like I said, my brother bought it for me whilst it was on sale, so I'd personally invested nothing into the experience besides my time, so maybe there is some bias there. But I can now say with confidence that I'd happily have paid for the game had it been on some kind of sale, with absolutely no regrets. I know some of you out there probably have been burnt too much already, and I'm not going to change everyone's minds. If I'd paid $60 at launch, I'd be pretty bitter about it too, and rightly so. But if you haven't played the game yet and the only thing holding you back is all the controversy, maybe find a way to get your hands on it and give it a go for yourself, you know? So yeah, on this occasion, I will happily admit that I was wrong about Cyberpunk 2077. There's no denying that it rightly deserved a lot of the criticism it received upon launch, but I think the reason people are still talking about it now, rather than it just dying out like Anthem or Avengers did, is because there was actually a genuinely solid game there lost beneath it all. And I'm glad to see now that with continued support from a clearly passionate development team, we can now finally experience that game more or less as it was intended. And here we go with the usual rambling outro now. That's what it says in my script anyway, so let's give it a whirl. First, obviously, thank you very much to everyone for 1,000 subscribers. That was a huge deal for me and Cam. I know 1,000 subscribers isn't really a lot in the grand scheme of things to a lot of people, but to me and Cam, that's huge, and we really didn't expect to get that many that quickly since posting videos more recently now. If for those of you that don't know, you have to have 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watch hours within 12 months to monetize your channel and become part of the YouTube partnership program. So that's a really big deal for us now. We can do that. We got 4,000 watch hours from the first Halo video we put out that did really well. Thank you very much to everyone. It means a great deal. Obviously, we're not here to do this for the money. We're not going to earn much, frankly, off these videos. A little bit of ad revenue here and there, maybe. But we're doing it because we're enjoying it. We're doing it because we like games, we like TV shows, we like nerdy stuff, we like discussing it with you guys. There's been loads of good comments, plenty of great comments out there, so thank you very much. Plenty of weird comments too. Someone said I sound like Henry Cavill. I don't hear it myself. I mean, I'm British, and I don't sound like a northerner, so I guess that might be why. But other than that, yeah, it's been a good time so far, and we're going to carry on with these things. So thanks so much for the support, and now I'll pass over to Cam to hopefully say something more coherent than me, because I can't do this ad-lib stuff very well, as you can probably tell. So yeah, over to Cam.
Hey everyone, it's me, Cameron. I'm not much better at doing these either, so prepare for this to be a little bit weird like Glenn's outro as well. But I'll try and keep it short because this video is already at 18 minutes. So thanks for that, Glenn. But yeah, thank you so much everyone for 1,000 subscribers. I remember back in the day when YouTube was like a massive thing, and I was like, oh, just imagine being able to do that for a living. And I know we're nowhere near being able to do it for a living, but we're certainly on our way. And it's all thanks to 1,000 of you guys. So thank you so much. And yeah, I'm going to say goodbye for now. And we'll see you guys in the next one, and hopefully we'll get more and more of you guys behind us, and we'll enjoy more and more content together. So thanks again.